So hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a great day. In this video, I want to answer the questions you guys asked in my 1,000 subscriber video. You guys asked some great questions, all of them, and I want to do my best to answer every single one, at least in part, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into that. So Gabby Fawcett asks, you mentioned you were a scholar. What did you study and where? I'm curious to know your academic background. Gabby, thanks for the question. You know, my PhD at least, my master's and PhD are from Queen's University in history. I also did my undergraduate degree in history and political science at the University of New Brunswick. But those are my two graduate degrees, and my current position is a postdoctoral fellow at U of T in history. So my research largely looks at the history of the Canadian left as it pertains to the labor movement especially and the CCF-NDP. My dissertation, which is now a book with UBC Press, was on Pierre Trudeau and his relationship with labor and the left, and my current research looks at specifically A.R. Mosher, who was a kind of pioneering railway labor leader in Canada, but through a wider project that looks at workers in the Great Depression as they grappled with, the crisis of capitalism and how to respond to it. So I feel my academic background really helps to inform a lot of my contemporary political commentary, because while, I haven't studied at a professional level, modern issues as maybe a political scientist or an economist or a sociologist has, but I bring a good general knowledge of those things through being well read, combined with a historical context that often contemporary scholars, social scientists, what have you, don't often have, at least not to the same extent. Lost in the Fog asks, I have a question. Why don't you have a Patreon account? I'd rather give you a few dollars a month more than turning off my ad blocker. And I totally get that. Look, the reality is that when this video was made, I didn't have a Patreon, but it just so happens that I created a Patreon today and have uploaded it. So if you want to see that, I'll provide a link in the description. If you look it up, it's just, Patreon Christo Avalis, my name. It should come right up. The name is pretty unique. And you'll see a whole bunch of interesting rewards and tiers there. Lost in the Fog wasn't the only one to mention it. Another person said, in the comments, you really should create a Patreon. I'd love to support you there. So I figured if at least a couple people are saying it, more people are thinking it, and I think it's a good way to show me a bit of support to help me create a lot of these videos. Because the reality is that I haven't quite hit the YouTube watch time threshold to monetize, and a lot of my writing I do, while I'm paid for some of it, most of the writing and media consultation and stuff I do is actually unpaid. So it is very helpful for me, and it's encouraging to me to know that people are able to support me, if they have the financial means. Dan Courtbane, I'm not sure. Dan, let me know in the description. Let me know in the comments how to pronounce your name. Sorry about that, friend. Are you going to be doing a video and analysis on Jason Kenney winning the premiership in Alberta? Great question. I don't know if I'll do a video on Kenney winning. I think at the end of the day, it was pretty obvious why he won. And it's that, Alberta is generally a pretty conservative province. And that once the UCP was formed, once Kenney was able to get the Progressive Conservatives and Wildrose to merge, the cards were really stacked against Rachel Notley. And whether or not she could have done anything to stop it, I think some people will have that debate. But my opinion is there was very little chance of her winning that election, short of, oil tripling in value or something crazy like that. That just gives her the ability to cut taxes and increase spending and basically do the impossible that with the oil prices as they are right now. So more likely is that I will be looking at some of the stuff happening in Alberta, especially as it pertains to potentially regressive laws that affects workers or GLBTQ folks or marginalized people, what have you. That's definitely going to be something I'll look at from time to time, but I don't know if I'll be making a video on the election itself. I think a lot of other people have covered that, and I don't know if I have much more to add. One thing is, there is a debate to be had about, did Rachel Notley govern correctly given the context? And I think there's an interesting discussion there. Some people said that, Notley did her best to represent the interests of Albertans. She fought for them, at the federal level. She built good programs. And alternatively, though, some people suggested that, look, especially once the Wildrose PC merger happened, Notley and her team should have known victory is impossible, or so unlikely as if to it should be discounted. And she should have governed for a good time and not a long time. And she should have been much more willing to implement, radical changes that would be politically potentially unpopular as they were made, but would be difficult to undo. And in so doing, she would, seal the fact that she had made real change. Some people have made a comparison there between, the Dave Barrett government, the Dave Barrett BC government in the early 1970s. It was only in for a kind of one majority term, but made a ton of changes that made BC better. And yeah, it's true that the NDP was out of power for a long time after that, but the party nonetheless continues to form government in BC, and the NDP solidified itself as, one of the two main parties in the province. So Alberta's sort of done one of those things, but perhaps some people have thought Notley was too cautious at times, given the fact that, there was no way she was going to win anyway. Florence Vandermeer asks, I just discovered your channel and I'm thankful. I wonder, though, how do you remain positive about the future? Politically, but most of all, environmentally. We're heading for a disaster, don't you think? Do you predict Scheer will be the next PM? The thought frightens me. And I agree. I don't want to see Scheer be the next prime minister either. If the polls are to be believed right now, though, he would be the next prime minister, unless, under a minority situation, and a minority does look to be the most likely option right now, the Liberals and the NDP could work together to implement electoral reform. Now, the cards are in the Liberals' hands here. The NDP has made it clear. If there's a minority parliament and the NDP holds the balance of power, the NDP will support a party willing to implement electoral reform, a proportional system, most likely mixed member proportional, not a referendum, none of that. They're going to actually ask for the implementation of the new electoral system. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's the kind of party policy as outlined right now. So Justin Trudeau could remain prime minister if he's willing to play ball. But again, for all we know, the polls will shift, dramatically many, many times between now and October. So who knows? In terms of optimism, I think it's weird, right? On the one hand, you got to feel a little pessimistic about the climate and the rise of the far right and what will these things mean for us and for our children. I totally agree. But I also see, the rise of new left energies. The NDP's become more bold now than it has in quite a while, at least since the 1980s. And you see the rise of the left in the United States through Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and even Elizabeth Warren, who, is embracing this kind of left energy as she puts forward very bold policies. And of course, needless to say, there's Jeremy Corbyn in Britain, who has sort of reignited the socialist energies within the Labour Party. So there's a lot to be hopeful for, too. And I think at the end of the day, you just have to do your best politically. You just have to try to engage in the best way you can. Not everyone's going to make YouTube videos, but some people can. Try to change minds that way. Not everyone has a lot of money to donate to political parties, but many people have the ability from time to time to donate a little bit of labor to help knock on doors or make phone calls or put up signs or sign up volunteers themselves who can really help to change things. So I would say that as long as you're doing your best to get involved in your community and bring progressive and positive change, then you can feel at least a little bit optimistic and know you're doing your part. Other than that, maybe I'm a bit of a dreamer, maybe I'm a bit hopeful, maybe I'm a romantic, but you can only do so much, and you can only try to have a positive outlook. John Doe says, been subscribed to you since I saw you on David Dole show. We don't have nearly enough independent/non-mainstream political commentary in Canada, outside of the Faith Goldie / Lauren Southern types, unfortunately. So I'm glad to see more voices like yours. What do you think about Jagmeet Singh so far as NDP leader, and how well do you see him and the NDP doing in the upcoming federal election? And what does Jagmeet Singh need to do to have success in the upcoming election, and what do you think the realistic ceiling is for the NDP in October? Great comment. I totally agree with you that YouTube is a space that needs more left-wing voices, and specifically needs more left-wing voices from a Canadian perspective. David Dole's a fantastic voice. He's a rather large YouTuber. He's got over 100,000 subscribers. So when I just celebrated 1,000, he was like, well over 100. So David's great. He's been a bit of a mentor to me. He's had me on his show. He's helped me with advice about how to produce content and promote content. So I love David. He's a great guy. So be sure to check his channel out 100%. But in regards to the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, I like Jagmeet Singh's performance so far. I do. It's improved since he's been in the House, and I think he's done a good job at promoting some new progressive bold policy, but not putting all his cards on the table. So for instance, we have the new capital gains tax, we have the retrofitting of all homes, we have the decriminalization of drugs, and we have national pharmacare. All of those are bold progressive policies that aren't coming from the Liberals or certainly the Conservatives. And I think that you're going to see more. You might see other forms of socialized medicine being added into our healthcare system. Maybe eye care, who knows? I know that the retrofitting plan is only step one of the Green New Deal. Jagmeet Singh has also talked about inheritance taxes in addition to capital gains taxes. And on all of these fronts, I think Singh has really started to build some momentum, but has not put the book out so early that Justin Trudeau can simply counter it, through polling and triangulation and poaching here and there. Singh has done a good job in that regard. I had some concerns, with Singh at first, namely that he was coming from the provincial level, but he really did warm up for me over the leadership campaign. And while Nikki Ashton was my first pick, Singh was my number 2 pick. So I've been more or less happy with his performance. In terms of what he needs to do to change, I think he just needs to keep going in the same direction, but perhaps a little bit more stridently and quickly. We do need to see a little bit more on the taxation front. I want to see more on the Green New Deal. I want to see more in terms of social programs. I want to see more commitment, not just to building housing, but specifically public housing. And Singh's plan does have room for public, non-market housing, but I want to see that play a bigger role. But in general, I'm quite happy. In terms of the party's, ceiling in the next election, that's something that's really hard to speculate on. If you look at the polling right now, it's a mixed bag. There'd be some gains in much of English Canada, but some losses in Quebec. And while the party would, likely not be able to form government, if the polling's to be believed right now, the party would be in a great position to hold the balance of power in a minority. And so that could be an interesting, increase of power for Singh and the remaining NDP caucus. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. But it's not implausible for, the polling to change quite rapidly. Justin Trudeau, for much of the time where he was Liberal leader to the time he became Prime Minister, sat in 3rd place. Jack Layton, even 3 weeks before the 2011 election, was polling below 15%, and yet ended with about 30%. So it's essential to realize that politics moves very fast, especially during election periods. And the opportunity for Jagmeet Singh is that very few Canadians really know who he is. And I think that bodes well, because if he can make that impression with them, as more and more people start to actually tune into politics, I think they'll like what they see, because he's a very likable, charismatic, relatable guy, and I think that he has a lot to offer Canadians. And finally, Nom Nom Moo, I hope I'm saying that right, asks, what are your top 5 favorite video games, and what political ideology do you most identify with? So, that video game question's the toughest of the bunch, frankly. Way tougher than, are we all not going to die in a climate catastrophe? Because, picking 5 favorite video games, it's a tough one. First, I'll start with the easy one about ideology. I would say I'm a democratic socialist. My democratic socialism is influenced by, the history of the Labour Party and the CCF, but also through Marx and Jesus Christ. That through all of these various traditions, I feel that my democratic socialism can be summed up in this idea that we need to abolish capitalism. 100%. We will not have a just society if we have a capitalist society. The two are incompatible. So the capitalism must go. The question for me is, how must it go? And I am convinced that the only way you're really ever going to do it is through democratic and constitutional means. I don't think violence is going to be the way to achieve it. I don't want violence to be the way to achieve it, but I don't think it would be the way to achieve it. I'm of the view that Harold Lasky would express, back in the 1930s. He was a Labour Party intellectual. He was a professor at the London School of Economics. He was a Marxist, but not a communist. And Lasky said, the state must dominate property, or property must dominate the state. And I agree. And my view is that the state, along with worker and cooperative ownership, must be dominant over private property. That's the solution. That when we talk about what ails us, too often it is private property and profit motives. and that if we subvert those things, especially as it applies to necessities and things that trend toward oligopoly and monopoly, we will build a better society. That's my opinion. In terms of video games, I mean, that's a tough question. I don't know if I could list the top 5. If I had to pick one game to be my favorite, it would probably be Earthbound, but I also really liked Final Fantasy 8 and 9. I played a lot of those. Those 3 games are near the top of my list because no matter how many times I beat them, every few years I just got to go back and play them again. You know, the story, the mechanics, the completionist elements, it's just so fun. It's like a zen moment as you play those games, a nostalgic moment, a zen moment. I also really like sports video games. Maybe that doesn't fit my type, but I love games like FIFA. I don't like the pay-to-win elements that are being added in recent years, but I love games like FIFA and Madden and things of that sort. Finally, I love, strategy games. I like Civilization, games like that, but I really love grand strategy, like Victoria, Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis. Those games are so fun to me. And finally, I played a lot of World of Warcraft, a lot of MMOs. I really like that kind of game. I love the community. I love the RPG elements. I love the persistence of it all. Your character constantly growing. There's something very, very satisfying about those kind of games. And lastly, before I forget, I really love Rocket League, which is basically, for people who don't know, it's basically car soccer. It's a fantastic game. Give that one a try. Even if you don't like sports, I think you might like that game. So thanks, guys. That about wraps it up. I really want to thank you for your questions. They were fantastic and thoughtful, sometimes funny. I really enjoyed thinking about them and answering them. And I'll be sure to do more videos like this, more Q&A videos as we move forward. As I noted, I have started a Patreon. You can go to the link in the description, or again, look up Christo Avalise and you'll see it. There's a couple stretch goals you guys might want to be aware of. If I get to $100 a month, I will do a monthly YouTube live stream where we'll talk about politics, games, the news, whatever you guys want to talk about. And that'll be a great place where you can ask questions in the comment section and, get a live response from me. So I think that'll be a new and interesting experience. If we get to $250, I'll be upgrading my audio-visual equipment, and, bit of a stretch goal, I don't know how long, if we'll ever get there, but if we get to $500 a month, I will on YouTube do a full, uninterrupted playthrough of Earthbound, no matter how long it takes me. It'll probably take me a good 10 hours, if not more, but I'll do it all, and you guys can be along for the ride if you choose to suffer along with me on that. So thanks again for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.